Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to do a case study on defensiveness, which may have something to do with victimhood. We will talk about that. Now you can draw your own conclusions about what's going on here with this guy in this case study. I think it's a great example of why it's important to take a conceptual approach to your psyche, which means to ask why down to first principles. Otherwise, you don't know what's essential, and you don't know what to focus on, and you won't be able to change. Change doesn't take work. It just takes focus. People think, I need to go out and do all these things and be part of all these retreats. And no, you're just distracting yourself, right? That's the treadmill of self-improvement. Got to focus on a few key things. It's going to be painful, but it's really not going to be a lot of work. The pressure point analogy works here, right? If you want Goliath, the Goliath that is your neurosis, if you want that to go down, I know Goliath is this huge guy. You can't really wrap your mind around how big he is, perhaps. Or if you look at one corner of him over here, you lose track of this corner, right? He doesn't fit in your range of perception. I get it, but you don't have to figure it out. You just have to get the one point where if you hit that point, he's going to go down. So that's what we're talking about today. And yeah, I'm still going to do my presentation on deinstitutionalization, part 2, the solution to the homeless problem. We'll get to that maybe in a couple of weeks. We'll see. So this Michael, we call him, begins. I've been dealing with defensiveness recently. I'm not clear where to begin fixing this. It's hard to exit my defensive states once it's begun, and it's hard for me to see them coming before they arrive. Diamond is hard. Dealing with your emotions is difficult. Okay. There's my editing there. But yeah, of course. So what are you talking about here? You can't exit your defensive states once they've begun, and you can't see them coming before they arrive. Right, because defensiveness isn't really the problem. Right? It's the symptom. It's not the virus. It's what happens when you feel like you need to protect yourself. It comes at the end of the loop, as we'll call it, which we'll go through in a bit, like shame and beliefs. Like these things aren't fundamental. Your shame and your negative beliefs are what you feel when you mismanage emotions fundamentally. Now, often people will say that, you're getting defensive. You're too angry. But when we understand the loop, when we see this conceptually, the truth is you're defensive because you are in fact not angry enough. And what's the difference between defensiveness and a healthy defending of yourself? Because if you try to defend yourself in a healthy way, the goal there, you seek transparency. Defensiveness as a defense mechanism, like you're trying to protect yourself, is you're doing exactly that. You're protecting yourself. So it's good to distinguish between those two states, which really comes through, emotionally literate, becoming emotionally literate, being literate, reading your emotions well. And so he continues. I am aware its origin, the origin of my defensiveness, is the frequent harsh criticism from my parents growing up. However, I am unsure what work I should do to help me exit these episodes more quickly or see them coming and act versus react. Yes, harsh criticism from your parents is the origin, but it's not the cause that matters. It's what Aristotle would call the material cause, the trauma. And by trauma, I don't mean any kind of capital T official definition. I just mean you're put in a situation where you lack the resources to handle the stress that you're given. And if you're 8 years old and your parents are repeatedly, criticizing you harshly, then you don't have the resources to deal with that. And that is the origin of the neurosis, the origin of your defensiveness, right? You're saying, I have to defend this part of me. We'll get more clear about what that part is. But the real cause, the only cause that matters, the efficient cause, right? The agency input into this neurosis is your avoidance. Your avoidance of what? We'll get to it. But yeah, emotions would be the formal cause. Emotions and how they work would be the formal cause, defensiveness, and then the final cause, the goal of the defensiveness, as we already kind of talked about, is to protect yourself. So this is really important to understand, right? I mean, if you go back to my whiplash analogy, if you get rear-ended in a car accident and you get whiplash in your neck, it's not your fault. that you got in a car accident, perhaps. Nobody's saying it's your fault, but by the nature of the whiplash that you have because of that car accident, it is your responsibility to do something about it. Right? Even if the guy who rear-ended you, he could pay for your medical bills, you still have to go in and do the rehab yourself. He's not going to be able to move your neck around for you. That's by the nature of what a neck injury is. Only you can go in and do the rehab. And it's the same thing when you're criticized when you're ate repeatedly by your parents. That's not your fault. But by nature of what your defensiveness, by nature of what your neurosis is now, even if your parents wanted to solve it, to fix it for you, they couldn't. Go and try to get an apology out of them and see how empty you feel afterwards, right? That's not how you resolve the issue. He continues. I notice the defensiveness often with my wife because we interact the most, but it can happen with anyone who challenges me in any way. I feel like I can't be wrong. And this is what I was saying before about, back here to the final cause. Right? I feel like I can't be wrong. I need to protect myself. There's some weak part of me in there that I feel like I can't be wrong for whatever reason. What are you protecting? Exactly. I mean, it's everything and nothing. It's everything because in a way, the neurosis is there to protect what you feel but don't say and what you don't feel, which is beneath that. But beneath that, it's really nothing. That's why it feels so overwhelming. It's like, I got to protect everything, but what is it exactly? I can't name it. You're protecting yourself for no other reason than you've been protecting yourself, is another way of saying it. So let's go to an example of his defensiveness to make this more clear. For example, she asks a simple question and I respond as if she accused me of something, or I assume she's angry. So in the morning, she wakes up and says, "Good morning. Did you make me coffee too?" And he responds, "Well, no, I've been cleaning the kitchen ever since I woke up. I didn't know you wanted any. You never wake up this early." And then he says, "I could have waited for her to confirm she was upset that I only made coffee for myself. Now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and she is annoyed. She is, in fact, angry at me." And here we have the anatomy, just a quick aside, of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're not being attacked, but you're acting as if you are attacked. You take your anger, you take your unconscious anger, and you project it onto somebody else. You must be as angry as I am, or maybe said it another way. For this example, I woke up in the morning and if I woke up in the morning and you weren't making me coffee, I would be angry. I would be upset. It's one potential thing he's saying. And he continues, "It hurts when she says, 'Gosh, you're no fun to talk to sometimes.' She doesn't say this angrily, but disappointed and annoyed. And then I feel guilt and ruining what could have been an otherwise normal interaction. Sometimes I can do this multiple times per day, and it can be really upsetting to our relationship. And this, makes it very hard to be friends with people in general." Sounds like he's overwhelmed, and this is a common aspect of neurosis, or what I would call the traumatic response. Again, I don't mean trauma in any capital T official definition of what that is, but when you're put in a situation where you can't handle stress that you think you're supposed to handle, your response to that is to take on somebody else's feeling as your own. Or not even somebody else's feeling, just what you imagine somebody else's feeling to be. The point is, you don't have your own feelings. You're overwhelmed by the emotions of others. It makes being around people exhausting, difficult, and somebody, wants to hang out and be your friend. You go, "Oh my God, what's the point? I'm so overwhelmed by everything. Don't you see how busy I am at work?" It's easier to talk about that because, the how overwhelmed you feel when you're around people is more sensitive and it's more impactful for you. Then he continues, "I feel the defensiveness is much stronger." Oh yeah, so what's great about this case study, another great reason, is just as you talk this out, in the beginning he's asking, well, what's the solution? What do I do? But he just talks us out enough and he leads us towards the solution, which indicates how difficult it can be to focus on. Because even when you say the solution out loud, you're still not going to do it. Focus is key when it comes to change. So he says why he feels defensive. "I feel the defensiveness much stronger when I have an unspoken resentment." There you go. That would be repressed anger. I don't recognize I'm carrying around the resentment until I've overreacted to something. Carrying it around has been normal for me my whole life, and this is probably part of the larger issue. Yes, carrying around this resentment is part of the larger issue. It's the payoff, right? It's the payoff. It's what you do. It's one benefit you receive from repressing your anger. From repressing resentment, from repressing your anger, from saying, oh, I can't have this resentment, that's not polite, and putting that away for the sake of, it sounds like, appeasing other people and their emotions. For the sake of other people not feeling certain emotions. That's really what you're doing. That's really why you're repressing yourself. That drive, really, for individuation. And you become addicted to that. We'll go through it in a couple minutes here with the payoff. So just another example of this, not another example, but just one example of this unspoken resentment, what this looks like, is recently I wanted to go golfing, but I didn't even tell my wife this because I assumed that she wanted me to stay home with her and the baby. I started to resent that despite not even speaking it. Right? He was defensive that day. And then he finally told her that he was scheduling a golf outing, and then he had a less inclination to be defensive. And then he just finishes up here, feeling like a victim and blaming someone for my issues as part of the payoff. Maybe. Yes, maybe it is. And if by maybe you mean definitely. First, let's just go over what is resentment. What's that? What are those marks doing there? So let's go over resentment. It's part of anger. Anger is one of your two primary emotions. There's anger and anxiety. These are not your only feeling states, but these are your two primary emotions. Resentment is a kind of anger. So let's just quickly, let's just go over how you get angry. Yeah, this is the line of consciousness and unconsciousness. So you're hurt. Some hurt gets in your boundary, or there's a need that has gone unmet, and you feel anger. That is the proper response. Now, there's three things you can do with anger. The first thing you can do is repress it, and you get sadness. The other thing you can do is you can dump anger onto other people, and this is hostility. Partly conscious, partly unconscious. Now, typically when people talk about anger, they're referring to hostility. And so now we have this negative connotation on anger because it's associated with hostility. But when you feel the healthy anger, before you even dump it on somebody, like you feel an injustice, you were accused of something and you feel angry about that, you go, ooh, anger is wrong. I'm not supposed to feel that. And so you repress that and then, do some psychological machinations, fabrication to say, well, it doesn't really matter what other people think of me. It's like, no, you defend yourself, right? You're repressing that anger. So hostility is one way. We just take it and we dump it on to other people. And then the other thing you can do with anger, the healthy thing, is you use it to get your needs met, which often involves the confrontation of your anxiety, and you really need anger to confront your anxiety. And then you feel compassion or gratitude. Now, where's defensiveness? Defensiveness is probably kind of here. Right? And resentment is here. I like to think of resentment as a sadness that you feel in the moment. It's a sadness that you're talking about. So in the therapy that I do, in fact, we do not talk about sadness at all. We talk about resentment because I know that if we're just talking about resentment, we're going to get what you're sad about. We're going to get those things about you or things about life, like those needs that you have that have gone unmet and you really don't believe that they'll ever be met. Although maybe part of you does realize that they could get met one day, which is why you're holding on to it as anger, and that's how you feel it as resentment. So what's a resentment that this guy has, that Michael has? Well, one thing he brings up is, the criticism from his parents. So we'll just say there could be more resentments here to go through, but one resentment is he's I'm not sure what that was, but anyway. Okay, so anyways, he's so what's so that's what resentment is. Now what's the loop? What does the loop look like? I kind of showed you in the previous meme I had there, but let's go through it. And this is just your pattern of behavior that leads to the neurosis. right? If you could change the neurosis, if you could just stop being defensive, then you wouldn't need to go in and see what's causing it. You would just change it. You would say, oh, I need to stop being defensive, and you would stop. But that's why you can't get out of it. That's why you feel trapped, is because neurosis is a trap, and in order to get out of it, you need to think of it conceptually, which is what we're doing now, right? If you're Indiana Jones, you're trapped in like a trap room, right? Are you trying to lift the stone door up that's falling? No, that's not how the trap works. You need to understand that there's a lever somewhere. There's a release mechanism for you to know that. You have to know, how mechanics work and whatever. You need a way out of the trap that is not concrete bound. That's not how traps work. That's not how your neurosis works. So what's the loop? The first stage of every loop is you feel anger. This is healthy anger. You have a need, and anger is your response to that need. Now for the neurotic loop, when you have a healthy need, what do? Is you repress it. How does Michael repress it? Well, the anger, we'll call that resentment. How he's repressing it, he said that word guilt. It sounds like he feels guilty. It sounds like he feels guilty that he has resentment. And he's like, oh, I can't have that. That's not right. Or if I have that resentment, people won't like me. So he represses that. And then what happens because of that? Then you get isolation and then shame. Right? Shame is not the root of anything. That is an affect you feel, and quite natural response to mismanaging your emotions. And then we get the payoff. Then we get, okay, so what payoff do you get for doing this thing, repressing your healthy anger, repressing your resentment, if you don't know what your healthy need is, just remember that the fundamental healthy psychological need is to have a feeling, feel it, identify it, and express it in a healthy way. So that's Michael's healthy need here, is to be able to express this resentment. But we're just going through the loop now. And this is what he's repressing. And the payoff here is the victimhood, right? The blame. How do you, right? And it's not like that feels good to be a victim and blame, but when you're a victim and you're blaming your dad for your problems, then you don't have to look at your own problems. And then there's a belief, some kind of belief. Here, it's usually some semblance of I'm not good enough. And here it sounds like the unconscious implicit belief of repressing your resentment is just very simply, I'm not good enough to communicate my needs, my anger, my resentment, whatever. It's something like that. So how do you work through this? How do you begin to repress it? Well, how you express emotions is really just an extroverted version of the loop. So you first say what the facts are. What are the facts of this situation? I feel resentment about my dad because of his critical nature. That would be maybe one thing. How do you feel? You feel resentment. And then what does this resentment mean about me? What does this feeling I have mean about me? Not what does the situation mean about me? What does the feeling mean about me? Well, it could mean I need to protect myself. And then to go deeper into that, you need to ask yourself, it can be helpful to ask yourself, why? Why do I need to protect myself? Well, because I can be hurt by others. I mean, this is just, subjective, and these are mostly going to be your unconscious beliefs. This is your unconscious issues that are informing how you are mismanaging this anger that we refer to here as resentment. Now, why can I be hurt by others? Well, because I'm defenseless, helpless, I'm some kind of victim. And here, when you go through the meaning well enough, it usually gets you to the responsibility. Stability. And then the three questions we ask to look at our responsibility is, how do you benefit from the victimhood? Well, when you're a victim, you get to blame your dad. And maybe this is just normal for you, right? Whenever I have a problem, I just blame my dad. And you can really become addicted to doing things like that, right? Emotions are chemicals in your brain. And you can become addicted to them like you can any other chemical. How do you contribute to this feeling of resentment? Well, you hold in your resentment. That's one simple way. There's probably a lot more going on here. I'm just going through this generally. I get to keep in my anger. I keep in my resentment. This makes it worse, right? By avoiding the problem, it grows, of course. Then how do you relate with anybody if there's a conflict here? Well, it sounds like there's a conflict with your dad. So he is critical. How do you relate with your dad's critical nature? Are you ever critical? Usually you are. That's where I would look first. Now, maybe you're not. You don't criticize other people. Maybe you're more inwardly critical. Maybe you just walk around judging other people. Well, you think that's any different? Well, I guess to the degree it is. It is different. I guess it is better to hold that in as opposed to dumping onto a child. However, it's not different enough. It's not different enough. So that's how you relate with your dad. So you can understand what he's going through. And this is just one pass through these feelings. You keep doing this over and over. Patterns start to emerge, and you get a lot better idea on what you are able to do, whatever the next step is to handle this problem. So this is why we need a conceptual approach to your psyche. So when you feel trapped by the neurosis, you can get out. So when you're Indiana Jones and the walls are caving in and the ceiling's coming down with the spikes, that's from Temple of Doom, right? And you can think about what's going on and get yourself out of it. Get yourself out of that room and into the next room. That's why it matters. Got to first get clear about how you mismanage your emotions, and once you do that, then everything else falls into place. It's going to take focus, and it is going to be painful. But if it feels like it's work, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. So that's it. That's what you do with resentment. That's what you do with defensiveness when you're feeling it. Got to express yourself better. You got to practice. Just practice with yourself. If you, this is what we do in therapy, just practice going through these feelings. And, I don't want to say too much, but because I can't, because, when you do that, when you are honest, what you're able to do will be so painfully obvious that you won't be able to not do it. Whatever that is for your situation. Awareness, awareness is the key. Acceptance, awareness, that really is the key to growth. And you got to do that in the right way. Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck trying to not be defensive, and it's just going to make it worse. Because like I was saying before, people say, oh, you're defensive. Oh, you're so angry. You go, okay, I'm going to not be angry anymore. I'm going to be even less angry. I'm going to repress my anger even more. And then it's going to get worse and worse. Right, it's like the trap door is coming down and you're trying to lift it up. Not only you're not going to lift it up, but now you're going to hurt your back. And it's going to be more difficult for you to find the lever that you need to spring. You need to flip to spring the trap. So that's what we can help you with here. If you want to find out more about what I do in my process, my views on psychology, my philosophy of psychology, how this applies to therapy, please reach out. I do free consultations. joinanimus.com/schedule. If nothing else, I just want to help you look at your loop. Just give you some feedback on what your loop could be, clarity. I just want to make your issues more clear. Working through your emotional issues, it's going to be difficult no matter what. We can at least make it clear. As for my book, I guess I'll just say... because the reason why I've been taking more of a break from YouTube is to work on my book, and that is done from my perspective. I did send it out to my buddy who helps me edit this stuff. I sent it out to him for a second time, and I think it's there. I think it's a point where it may just need a few more quick little edits, but it's basically done. We'll see what he says. I respect his opinion, of course, which is why I have him help me edit, but we'll see. If he says it's not done, then it's not done, but... So I'm going to be back. I don't know when I'm going to be back next to work on that or to do that part 2 presentation on deinstitutionalization, but I'm sure I'll be back for that. And that's all for this week. I leave it there, and I wish you all the pain and joy that comes from getting honest about your resentments.